Stacy Rothgeb, MBA student for the University of Denver. I just watched the session for Ryan Geller, who is the CEO of Patagonia, interviewed by Katie Couric. I wasn't able to make that session in real time because of my workshop. But so I went back and watched it because I was very interested in it, and it was amazing, absolutely worth the time. I'll actually include the link in the write-up. I think everyone should go watch it. Some big takeaways is that Ryan Geller, I think I said this in one of my other videos, that I'm seeing this theme where people who are advocates for sustainability and in the environment, or people who are really living by their missions, kind of have to have this little self-realization early in their careers where they start down one path and they have to try a couple things until they find where they need to be. And maybe this is true for anyone who is passion driven, is that you've got to find what that passion is. And so Ryan Geller is basically the same thing. He talks about how even early in his career, he pursued jobs that were related to the outdoor industry because he knew this was a passion of his, and that he went for Black Diamond to get a job, and it was a great story. He went applying for a job and he thought that they would put him in something he'd grow to, and they offered him a $6 an hour, loading shelves kind of job. And he took it anyway because he knew that it was the kind of company he wanted to work for and he could work his way up. I think that was a great thing. And even while there, he ended up going back to school and getting a law degree, never practiced law. A question I would have is like, why law out of all the things you were going after? But anyway, how it's this evolution of time where you have to figure out where you can provide the impact that you want. So he built his life and career around his passion. Also talked about like everyone's got to find their thing. Climbing is his. And it was interesting to hear him say that the reason why climbing was his sport and what drove his passion, rock climbing, is because it was like a meditative state for him, where it was the one thing where when he's doing it, all he's focused on is the moment. And so it's that regenerative moment. And so it's what fills his bucket. So a lot of conversation was around the owner of North Face, the founders, Doug Tompkinson, and as many people know, they recently reorganized their company where it is no longer a single owner, it's owned by a trust. And the intent of that was to ensure that the company would live by its values forever, and so there was fear that if the founding owner retired and someone else came in, that they would not live by those values. And we've seen that in many other very successful corporations where a company seems to lose its way when its founding owner moves on. And so this was a way to kind of solidify those values. And so another very interesting thing that was repeatedly said was how Patagonia is unapologetically for-profit company, and the need for that because they want to make money. Granted, they have chosen by their values to donate a significant portion of that money back to environmental causes, but at the end of the day, they're in the business of making money, and so they need to make decisions that reinforce that. And some other great takeaways I had were that Ryan was asked, working for a profit company, like who's to blame for our climate crisis? And his response was, basically every crisis we face has been created by businesses. And it basically comes down to companies and people in those companies that felt like they could get something for free or did not feel like they needed to clean up their own mess. And so, to me, that is the definition of sustainability, is that you're always thinking of the circularity of things. Like when I do this impact, what is when I do this action, what's the impact, and how do I need to make sure that that's only a positive impact? And if it's a negative impact, that I am compensating for that impact, cleaning up your mess. And so I thought that was very interesting. There was also a lot of conversation about being accused of being of woke capitalism. And I will say this is something that I now feel I need to go get a lot smarter on. I've heard the term, I kind of vaguely understand it, but I feel like I need to define it more. And very conveniently, I was reading an article earlier today in the Washington Post in one of my news feeds that was, they were saying the Republican Party was criticizing ESG corporations for woke capitalism. And that kind of caught my interest. Like, they're saying that we are doing a disservice to our economy by having these goals to leave the world in a better place than we found it, to strive for improvement. And I found that very interesting, but I'm going to kind of hold that as something I need to be a lot more educated on. I fundamentally do not think I agree with it, but I need better talking points about why I don't agree with it, and intelligent talking points. Another takeaway I took was that Ryan said customers and employees had the most power for change. And so it's not, well, this is a privately held company, so they don't have stockholders, but it's not the government, it's not the owners. At the end of the day, we feel like we're just one person, but as a collective, really, employees and customers are the ones that have the most power. And if you do something that they're really against, then you're going to hear about it and you're not going to be able to be successful. And when you could find something for them to believe in, that's where success comes from. Another interesting thing about Patagonia is they're getting into the food space. So yes, they have always seen the issues with clothing and the lack of sustainability around that industry, especially in our culture where we're becoming very disposable. An interesting thing is that when you buy clothes, they said you should be the owner of those clothes, not the consumer. And I thought that was very interesting. And I think I've said this about buildings, is that the making of clothes is the highest resource intense activity. And that's in that manufacturing process for the use of energy and materials and resources. And buildings are the same way. So I think there's a nice overlap there. And the need to have, and so Patagonia is well known for they have the full life cycle perspective with their clothes. So in their design, Patagonia has a program where they will fix the clothes that they have made, and when you are done with them, if they are still of good use, they will take them back and resell them, or they will dispose of them appropriately. So it was interesting to hear how now they design clothes knowing that they are going to be responsible for the repair, deconstruction, and recycling of them, and how it's changed how they design clothes. Patagonia has gotten into agriculture, and because it's another huge resource that is a drain on our natural environment and so they want to help solve that. I know not a whole lot about agriculture, so that was very interesting. One of the things to know is that like the top meter of soil has more carbon in it than anything else, and so that's why we have to be responsible how we're using that soil. And so much of it is the reason there's this density of carbon is because we've had irresponsible agricultural practices. So that idea that we need to be doing a better thing. The last thing I'll leave you with is that Patagonia actually what was this? Oh, this was in response to some of the actions of Donald Trump, actually, when he was being very anti-climate, is they founded the Patagonia Action Works. It's this organization, it was what I would call it, but it's skilled volunteering. And it's the idea that people with skills can volunteer to this organization, and they'll hook them up with maybe other organizations that need that support to create that mentoring, so that we're working together. And how it was described is if you had an environmental conservation organization that needed the help of an accountant or a graphic designer, that it creates those connections for volunteering to do that. And it's the idea that as a community, we're lifting each other up. I think this is amazing. I'm actually going to look out because NREL, we have a lot of skills, and I think there's a lot of people that would love to volunteer their skills to make some positive change. The last thing is that activism and change is manual labor. You have to work at it, and I think that's a great thing to leave you with. Thank you.